To order. Sorry. I must say, last Friday morning was a great day in the town when the rededication of the Betty Rounds Playground took place. I was there for the first dedication, and what a privilege, and it was wonderful to be there this Friday. Betty would have been thrilled to see all those happy little faces of parents and grandparents. A huge shout out to the grounds staff, Cindy and her staff, Jessica and whoever worked on this. It's a great place, another great place in Southern Pines for families to gather and kids to play. On a sad note, my friend and Planning and Zone Commission member, Lim Dowdy, passed away Sunday morning early. He made such an impact in the 4 short years that he lived here. His wife, Cynthia, serves on our Parents Commission, so please keep Cynthia and her family in your thoughts and prayers. It's a huge loss for all of us. Now turning the meeting over to Mr. Parsons.
Thank you, Mayor Haney. In the interest of brevity, I'll simply state that there are no additions, deletions, or changes relative to your agenda this evening, and there are only 2 items for which we'll be looking for some form of action or vote on, one being the appointment of representative and alternate for the Moore County Transportation Committee, and then when you get to the end of your agenda, you'll see a closed session for which someone will need to make a motion to enter into that session, and a vote will be had. Otherwise, everything this evening is simply informational and in advance of next Tuesday's business meeting. I will just jump right in. I had sent all of you an email regarding the Moore County Transportation Committee item. This is one that you may recall back when council had its organizational meeting in January, or was it December? Regardless, this was not one that showed up on your list because the Transportation Committee had not come up for some time. You may recall me talking about a larger regional committee for which I said an appointment would not be necessary because only one municipal representative gets to sit on that committee from Moore County, and it was not Southern Pines' turn in the rotation. However, the Moore County version of the Transportation Committee has representatives from each and every municipality across the county, and they contacted Beth earlier or last week and asked who our representative was, and we realized that we had not appointed one, and it was Mitch Lancaster previously. The last time this committee met was back in 2020, pre-COVID, and during that time, they were working on the Moore County Transportation Plan, which for those that have been around here for a few years, you'll recall that a number of representatives from NCDOT came through here talking about that plan and the fact that Moore County was, if not the only one of only maybe 2 counties in the entire state that did not have an adopted transportation plan for the last few decades. So it was a big win and a big success that they finally got to a plan back in 2020. And apparently the county commissioners are interested in starting to convene the Transportation Committee once again. I would assume in anticipation of updating plans and preparing for the next round of STIP rankings that will be sent forward to the regional level. So with that primer, I would simply ask whether what council's desire is relative to appointing a representative and then an alternate to that Transportation Committee.
And don't everybody volunteer at once. But who would like to serve on this committee?
Reagan, do you have any idea of the, once they start to go through the process again, how often they meet or the frequency?
I tried to look that up today and did not get an answer back as of yet if they've set any sort of meeting schedule. I know previously they were on, I think, almost a monthly schedule, but again, it was because they were trying to get that 2020 plan passed. So I don't know. I think historically it might have been more of a quarterly type of event.
Quarterly.
Pam, do you recall from your time in Aberdeen or?
That sounds familiar, but it's been a little while since.
Yeah,
I think
it was quarterly.
typically it was quarterly.
That's why it was not monthly.
No, it was not. I think it got that way for a little while, but I don't believe that's their plan moving forward.
Does that mean you're interested?
I mean, if no one else is wanting to help, yes, I will volunteer.
Okay, and who?
Speak up, and I'm glad to let someone else.
I'm happy to help
Okay.
also. I'm happy to be an alternate, or I'm happy to be,
Taylor is the representative and alternate. If to be Ann, is that? Do I have to even look to the side over here? Okay. Well, that's lovely.
All right, I move for Taylor to be our Transportation Committee representative with Ann as our alternate.
Aye.
Very much. Look forward to hearing your reports. The next time is review, is the hearings that, there's just a whole lot of them. The first one is a continuation from April the 12th, from St. John Paul. Are we getting a staff?
Yeah, I'll ask BJ just to provide a quick update on this one beyond what's in your packet.
Okay.
Quick update on this one beyond what is in your packet would be that we did receive a information from the applicant's authorized agent, Mr. Pete Bogle, that the parties who have been negotiating, which primarily consists of the residents of Pine Barrens, as well as the representatives of St. John Paul Catholic School, have failed to reach an agreement at this time. The applicants were ready to move forward with the hearing. Earlier today, we received an email from Andrew Pettish representing the neighbors, indicating that Adam Kiker is on his honeymoon, so they request a continuance. The applicants have indicated that they will be discussing the situation, and it is my understanding from the applicants as of now that although they would like to move forward, they certainly won't object to if the town council wishes to grant another continuance. But they also are going to rally and meet about that because at a certain point they would like to move forward and get some closure on this issue. But that's kind of a summary of all the communication, and they are still talking about it, so we'll probably have a firm decision by both parties about what they're looking for by next week.
Okay, well, they had said that if they didn't come to agreement, that they were looking for September because of the honeymoon, and so I think it would behoove all of us if they could come together. Usually when the two parties come together, it's far better than when we just drop the hammer on whatever.
Or in the alternative, does it make sense? I don't know logistically what normally happens, but does it make sense to consider a continuance based on the fact that people are coming from all over the place on this hearing? I mean, we have our friend here from North Wilkesboro today, which is a pretty good drive. Does it make sense for us to go ahead and continue? I realize last hearing, I remember Mr. Pettish saying that they would want a continuance if there wasn't an agreement because Kiker would be on his honeymoon. So I don't know what we do logistically.
I'll defer to Attorney Gill, but I don't believe we can offer a continuance until we actually,
motion?
because the motion to continue it named next week's meeting, I think we have to do something next
At
week
that
as a
meeting.
result of
Okay.
that. Yeah.
All right.
But we can continue, open it and then continue it, or do we have to open it and deal with it?
You can continue it again next week. It's just that when you stated the continuance last month, it was to next week's meeting. So you need to take some form of action next week, even if that's to continue it
It
for
makes
another
sense that we
month.
wouldn't be able to grant a continuance without a motion.
Right,
for
and
the
we'll
same,
just do
right?
that.
Okay,
At the next, yeah,
all right. But everybody's kind of on notice that that's a possibility.
right.
All right.
The next one is AX 0222 Pinehurst Surgical Clinic, looking for a voluntary annexation. BJ, is that you too?
Yeah, I'll turn this one over to staff. I will just make as a note, you may see a map somewhere in here that still has one little donut hole that is, of course, the Sandhills Pediatric site. And I just will let you know that we received an application for annexation of that site yesterday.
Good.
It's being reviewed for completeness, et cetera, but assuming everything is there, that will begin its cycle through this process at your work session later this month.
Excellent. Following SU 04.
Let staff.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to show you
Sorry,
the
I
subject.
said BJ and then I just didn't.
That's okay.
Yeah, he's fine. He's just sitting back there.
I was just going to show you real quick the subject parcel and in context of what's already annexed and what isn't pursuant to what Reagan was talking about. Here is a map of the subject property. Here's obviously the new Pinehurst Medical, Pinehurst Surgical, the Southern Pines Elementary and the Legends Phase 1 and the Pavilion Building. The subject property is actually you might say a flag lot that touches West Morganton because it's half of the right-of-way of Patriot that goes up through there, and then it's a 5-acre parcel located right here. This is the parcel that Reagan was talking about, which is the Sandhills Pediatrics. Again, like he said, we have received a petition for annexation for this parcel, and this public hearing that you're considering setting is for this parcel right here that is outlined in red in this image.
Now, is the Peds going to have to use that same little part of the flag, or are they going to have their own driveway, or do we know yet?
Pediatrics will be accessing off of Brucewood
Brucewood.
right here to come in right here, yeah.
Okay. Any questions for BJ? Okay. Didn't mean to snub you there, buddy. Okay. The next, I believe, is Pam talking about an addition to Bowles Funeral Home.
That one's quasi judicial, so we, other than just what's right there on the agenda,
Right.
if you have any questions about what it is, we're happy to answer those, but other than that, we'll defer.
It's right across the street.
Public hearing next week, and you have information.
Okay. What are you pointing to across the street? Thanks, Captain Obvious.
The site visit, just remember that next week.
I've cited too many visits over there. Thank you. These are action items for the next week. We have lots of architectural reviews. The first one is an architecture compliant permit for 600 Southwest Broad Street. Jennifer, oh, there you, I looked down and you just popped up.
That's right.
So if you would like to give the staff report, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Hello, good evening. Jennifer Hunt, Planner 1, the Town of Southern Pines. I am here to present AR 10, which is an extension from last month, and this is for 600 Southwest Broad Street addition, which is the old Wells Fargo building on Southwest Broad Street. And our applicants have really done well to address all of the issues from last month. So again, this is off Southwest Broad Street and West Wisconsin Avenue. The property is outlined here in yellow. This is in our central business district. So this is the reuse of an existing building. It's actually 2,172 square feet retail, cafe, grocery. I believe in the packet it says 1,954, but this number did not include the walk-in cooler. So it's 2,172 square feet. Again, the central business district and the downtown overlay, transition overlay, and it's where the old Wells Fargo Bank was located. And for full disclosure, a sign plan is a separate permit process, and so is the site plan. So this is the architectural compliance for what is new, not what's existing. So this is the front elevation. This shows the material list on the top right, but for percentage of brick, this is 37.94%. And they are going to be filling in where the drive-throughs are. They're going to fill this portion in, and this is what it will look like. This is the left side. That pop-up window is going to be not a drive-through. It's going to be where you can park and pick up your food, what have you. So this is what that left side will look like. And this is 46.54% brick. And it also shows you the amount of square foot of doors and windows. And the applicants are here tonight, so if I can't answer any questions, they're here as well. This is the rear elevation. The West Wisconsin side will have no, it'll stay exactly the same as it is. So this is a rendering of what it will look like when it's completed. And again, on that left-hand side, that is going to be the filling in of the 4 drive-through lanes for the old bank. This is what it looks like now. So. And the next picture. This is a rendering of what the other side is going to look like. The West Wisconsin side already looks like that, so it matches. And then in the rear side, and there's the pickup window. That's what it plans to look like. That's what it looks like now. So the only deviation, they had a few. The first one is the building segments. Because it's the reuse of an existing building, There does not appear to be any changes of building segments created as mentioned in the criteria. Again, they're filling in the space beneath. The height of the building is approximately 15 feet in length and 15 feet tall, 35 feet in length. And the building segments are not taller than wide, so therefore that's why it's not compliant with this section of the UDO. But again, it's the reuse of an existing building. In section 4.10.4C, it says that we should have 80% brick. However, for the front elevation, it's 37.94%. This is exclusive of doors and windows. And the rear elevation, 69.19%, and the side is 46.54%. So they will need a deviation for that. And then for the awnings, they would like to have 2 metal awnings. There is one on the front elevation and one on the left side above the pickup window. So it says, in our UDO, it says canvas or of like material, but it's metal, so that is their deviation request. And that's it for my presentation.
I had one question. And maybe while the brick was off, I thought it said it was matched in the other building, but then it showed like stucco panels, whereas the existing building looks like it's brick on the sides.
Oh, for
is it
just the
gonna-
West Wisconsin side, it's going to be brick as it was shown. Do you want me to turn back there?
I just saw
So
something that
it's
said
the other side,
stucco.
it's where they're filling in the drive-through.
So they're not dealing with the West Wisconsin side. Thank you, BJ.
It looks very similar to what it currently is. It is the exact same, actually.
Okay.
But yes, this is not that side, this is the other side. That side is gonna stay the same.
So in short, they're asking for a deviation in regard to the side where they're filling in with the drive-through, and they want to do stucco instead of the brick pursuant to the UDO requirement of brick. Is that right?
That's right. They have less than 80% of the brick requirement
Right.
for those other 3 sections, yes.
But is there any reason to not look toward a possible consistency with the other side? I mean, do you have any professional opinion?
So the applicant can answer that. You weren't here last month, but we did talk about this, but they can answer that better than I can. And they went back and they resubmitted what they could do the best they could. So I would let them answer that for
Okay.
you. Mhm.
And then I'm always confused about you say it's 2,172 square feet, and on their architectural compliance permit application, they listed as 1,954 square feet.
That's right, because they omitted the walk-in cooler, and so I had asked them that question, and they said they did not include the walk-in cooler, but that number that is here tonight, I think it was 2,100, it's on the first
2172 is what you just said.
Yeah, two.
72, yes.
So traditionally, the permit is not then edited to reflect that change.
It's in their email, so I'll just print that email and put it in their folder.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone have any questions from Jennifer?
The walk-in cooler area, is it included in the like drawing renderings?
In the site plan, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Where would it be?
I believe it's in the back, but I will defer to the applicant when they come up here to address that. Mhm.
All right.
And the window percentage, the brick percentage does not include the windows.
The doors or the windows, yes.
Right, so-
And I had them calculated out there as well because of this specific issue last month, so they did do their best to show that.
Okay, it looks like a lot of glass. Okay.
Okay, I'll let the applicant come up here. Thank you.
Hello,
Hi, Andy. Just state your name.
Andy Bledgy, Member Manager, Bata LLC.
Hi, my name is Sean Rodriguez. I am a representative of Seven Lakes Engineering Services.
Okay.
Enrique Artiga Building Design.
Okay.
Based on last meeting, a couple of questions you all had about the glass in the front, first of all, since that was the last one. We're trying to match the other building. It has a lot of glass on the front, so we're just trying to keep consistent but make it a change and also make it look more like a cafe little bit more, but it's, you can see from the building there, it's quite a bit of glass on the front. So we're trying to keep the glass in the front, but keep it going on the side. The other question was about brick. Fran wasn't here last month. We're trying to keep the stucco and the brick. The brick's the same brick that we used on the other building, and the stucco is going to be the same basic color stucco that's on that building. Other than we're going to power wash that stucco because it's pretty dirty right now. So, and the brick. But other than that, it's.
And the awnings, we've had this discussion several
Yeah.
times, that instead of canvas,
Yeah, we're using metal because it'll go out straight, and if you can see from some of the awnings we put on other buildings, they're wearing out quite rapidly now. We don't know if they're using different materials, but so we've been going with metal awnings just for durability and cleanliness. For some reason, the canvas awnings, I think a lot of it's dealing with the pollen that we get here, but they're taking a lot of wear and tear right now, so we're switching over to a metal awning type product.
Okay.
That's just for durability reasons more so than appearance.
Well, we've talked about that in our long-range plan, because we should probably change that requirement, because everyone that's come up here has been a deviation from that.
The other thing that's not on this picture that you will see, we're re-landscaping the whole property after this part of the, we're submitting the work site, but in addition to that, we're re-landscaping the entire property when it's all finished. But that's not in this meeting, so.
Okay.
The walk-in cooler is located where?
It's inside the building. Before it was pushed out on the back and it looked kind of odd, so we included it inside the building and closed it, so you actually don't see it anymore.
So does that bring the square footage back down? Why the extra
No,
couple?
brought it up to, before it was an addition to the back, it was kind of like a attachment to the
Right?
building, so it wasn't included originally. Then we decided to enclose it. So we enclosed it inside the building, so you don't see it anymore. It's part of the building
Okay,
structure.
so you have a bump out off the back.
We don't have that anymore. It's inside the building now. It used to be a bump out. That's what the square footage differences was, because the walk-in cooler originally was a portable type unit that was installed, so it wouldn't be included. It'd be considered equipment on the back, just like an HVAC system. But now it's actually part of the building. It's a walk-in cooler from the building, so it's now included as part of the square footage of the building.
So therefore, we're back to 1956 as far
No,
as,
that's why it was adjusted up to the 21.
I'm so confused. We got rid of the bump out, but we have less square
We
footage.
moved the wall out to include it.
Oh, okay,
So
there we go.
There was a bump out. We moved the wall out so it didn't look like a bump out. So
I see.
it's just a definition difference between, if it was equipment, it would be not included. If it's equipment, it is, or if it's inside the building, we have to include it.
So you've extended the back wall completely to accommodate the bump out?
Well, yeah, to screen it, yes.
Okay,
Yeah, so now it's all one piece, yeah.
all right.
Which is an improvement to
Yeah,
have.
it's actually an improvement. It looks better.
And the far side that currently is a drive-through, tell me again, I mean, you're saying you're going to use stucco that's consistent and brick that's consistent. Tell me again why to not use brick and use stucco instead? What is your
Why?
thinking?
It
Right,
just looks better,
according to,
me.
okay,
We're trying to break, the building was a bank, and we're not allowed to use the drive-through anymore, so we're trying to define different pieces of it and keep it kind of consistent with the same building, but also highlight that it has a new use. And so we want to transition to the two pieces. If we ran brick all the way around on both sides, it would just look like a bank again. And banks, I guess to more elaborate, banks are all built to say, stay back. And grocery stores and cafes are all built to say, come in. So we're trying to take a bank and convert it over to say, come in, rather than stay back. It's the same issue we had with 15 Chinkapin over in Pinehurst, where Agora is. All the things, all the poles in the middle of banks, these columns and stuff, is to make it secure. And we're trying to say, come in and be welcome. So it's a complete opposite use of the property. So it's
And it's quite an improvement, too.
yeah, it's a difficult thing to do. The reason that they're outside, the way that we try to curve it, but the building's very square, so you see some curves in the middle. But yeah, it's kind of difficult to do that with banks. It's kind of tricky. It seems when it works, everybody thinks this is great and it's really easy, but when it doesn't work, everybody really notices. So if we and so we're trying to, brick also says stay back. So we're trying to soften it up with some stucco.
So would the stucco that you're using be actual stucco, or would it be the fabricated stucco?
We don't know yet. Those are usually, typically today, almost all the stucco is a semi-synthetic stucco, but on this particular building, it's, they've used both historically. The top piece is, it's not actually even stucco, it's kind of aggregate inside of stone.
Right, right.
And so we'll be trying to match that type of look, but it'll be the same color. So but will it be historical, actual stucco? No, it will not.
It will be, I mean, we're talking metal lath and real stucco.
And we're talking about, we haven't decided yet, have we?
No, if I may,
Please.
if I may, what we are trying to do is trying to achieve the same look in terms of how we apply it, how we build it. We haven't decided yet because honestly, we'll find out what's cheaper and more convenient to do it when we do it. In terms of what the building is going to look like, it's going to look identical to whatever is currently there.
Yeah, typically, the historic stucco doesn't hold up as well as, I don't want to use the word synthetic, but the current stucco thing is not, it's a kind of a composite stucco. It will be applied to a masonry board. It will be, but I guess the definition of a stucco, like this, like that's up there right now, is they used a metal screen behind it and then stucco on top of the metal screen. We don't build that way anymore.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, it pulls out and it cracks and stuff.
And water comes in.
Yeah, water comes in, and it also doesn't bend. So the stucco that we're using today is it's quasi-synthetic. I don't want to use synthetic because it has a bad rap to it, but it is kind of a stucco that bends and gives more, and it's basically put on top of a fiberglass mesh rather than a metal mesh. So it does have some give to it.
Okay.
But to get that look up there, also we use foam details rather than, this one actually has wood details on the top that rots out. So we use a foam detail that doesn't rot. So I consider it a better product.
Wait, where would you use foam?
Well, foam is, it's an underlayment to get
Right.
shades and curves.
Right.
We use a foam type material.
So your stucco that you're putting on is a synthetic that is foam.
That's not what I said. I said we're
Okay.
using it's a stucco that's put onto a fiberglass fiber board.
Right,
Yeah. and
right.
It's applied that way. But to get details like indentions and stuff, we usually use a foam or some type of synthetic material. It's higher quality than what is there currently and will last longer.
You're talking to a woman who lives in a 100-year-old stucco house.
Yeah, well, it probably has cracks in it too. So,
Not many.
All righty. Any other questions for Mr. Pledgy? We good? Do we need for him to come back?
Yes, please, be back.
Can you come back
Back.
next week?
oh, yeah.
Okay.
I don't get a pass next week? No.
Guess not.
Oh, sorry.
We love seeing your face.
I'm back.
Okay. Next is AR 1322, an architectural compliant permit for Waterworks, and Pam, you're up.
I'm up.
Yep.
Same applicant. So they have straight far from the microphone. I will just say that your packet with this, as far as the staff report, was almost identical. What I did try to do in the staff report was just point out very clearly what had changed.
Right.
There are some changes, and we'll go through this. A lot of what you'll see on these slides are the images that were provided by the applicant. Totally new proposal for the exterior building materials, and they've actually provided two options. So I'll roll through that, and I'll be happy to take questions. And then, of course, Mr. Bledgy is here, and Mr. Bowles to answer any questions for them. Two options, as I mentioned, and they sent those, they were titled Waterworks SNC and Waterworks 2. Both of those are using brick as their primary building material now, but they do vary in the percentage of the brick, and there is a subordinate metal building material that's included in both, and there's more of that in one of the options than the other, and that is what impacts the brick percentages. So we'll just go through the calculations. We won't dwell on this because I think you'll get a better sense of what's being proposed in the subsequent slides, but these were the elevation drawings, and I'll go through each option separately. So we'll start with the SNC, and Mr. Bowles calculated this out very clearly for us as far as what the percentages were for the brick. With this S&C option, the front elevation is far exceeds the 80% requirement at 95.27%, and the rear elevation is a little over 3% brick. And then this slide shows what's on each side, and both of these are very close to the 80%. Don't quite reach it. And I think you'll see that in the renderings which they've provided. And what you'll see here is black brick, and then there's a band of metal across the top. And I don't want to sort of exceed my knowledge of this by describing it in too much detail because they're here to do that. But there's a band of metal across the top and a band of metal sort of midway running horizontally. And you'll see in the second option that top band of metal is wider, and that's why the percentages differ, and that's what makes up the primary difference in these two proposals. So I'll just run through these. This will give you a sense. What we saw when we were here last time, actually, they did bring the building materials, and they've been at my office, so I agreed to bring them up here for them to take those back. So that would be the front elevation. This is just a different angle of the front, sort of featuring the addition as opposed to the existing portion of the building. And you'll see here the band of metal that's at the top and more or less midway, with significant glass as well. This is the side as you're facing north. This would be the opposite side, and you're sort of seeing a portion of the rear of the building here where there is significantly more metal, and they've provided a calculation of just over 3% brick on this rear side that you're seeing. And this is facing the parking lot with Highway 22 being on the opposite side.
But it's rear to the building, but it's going to be their front entrance, basically.
Yeah, I'm going to touch on that in a moment. There's, I think, some interpretation that is warranted for that. And the more I considered this and looked at it, I'll tell you what my sort of outcome was on that. Then this is the second option, which is known as Waterworks 2. Again, these elevation drawings that say a lot, but I think it's a little more easily read with the renderings. Here they have on their front elevation almost at 80%. If you'll remember, this first option was 95%, so this one is over 78%. Rear elevation remains the same at a little over 3% brick, and then the two sides are a little bit lower because in the percentage of brick because that brick band on the top. There may be other reasons for that, but that's what stood out to me was that the metal band at the top was wider. And these are the renderings that they provided for this second option. And you'll see that metal band at the top of the new addition is more prominent than it was in the first option and here. This shows it pretty well. So this is the front. Mm-hmm. Again, that side sort of facing south. This would be the rear of the building and looking somewhat north in this view, and then the rear, a straight view of the rear. So some pretty significant changes from the previous submittal, particularly on the sides and the front facade.
Correct.
Having to do with other requirements besides the actual material, and this is what the mayor was just bringing up. So the UDO does state that the front of buildings should face the street and the primary customer entry should face the street. This building has entries both on the street side and on the parking lot side, which is the opposite side. I would say that this requirement or standard was written for mostly for downtown buildings where there's a high degree of pedestrian activity, folks are entering from the sidewalk. That's really not the case with this site. It's somewhat remote. Of course, we do have the park across the street, and there'll be some other development in that area, but it's just a different environment. And that being said, how do we define what the main entrance or the primary entrance is? Most folks who drive there, and that will probably be most folks who come there will drive there, and they'll enter from the parking lot side. But they have provided an entrance that faces the street. And of course, that's available to the customers at the customer's discretion. So I think this opens the door for a determination that the project is compliant with this particular standard. They can't control necessarily which of the entryways their customers will use, and they're providing one on both sides.
Okay.
Then the next standard that we talked about at the last meeting had to do with the width of the building compared to the height. There really hasn't been any change in the design as far as this dimension, as far as I could tell, and Mr. Bowles may be able to provide some clarification there. What I did was I took the new portion of the building as a building segment and the existing building as a building segment. But you still have on that left side over 100 feet of building that is only 35 feet tall. So it does not meet the standard in this case. You know, the applicant is dealing with, as we saw in Jennifer's item, an existing building that they are significantly modifying what else happens on the site. So that's, I think, worthy of consideration. We heard this also in the previous item having to do with the awnings. The awnings are proposed to be metal instead of canvas. And then the roof line, I'm bringing up things that have changed since the last submittal, so I'm not going through every one of the standards. But in this case, the standard is actually written that in a way that avoids uninterrupted planes of longer than 200 feet. So the building is longer than 100 feet. It's 173 feet. But there is an interrupted plane along the length of that because of the existing building compared to the addition. And so given that standard and the details of it, I think that it does comply with that one. And that was really what I had on this one. Happy to take any questions that you have. This is a significant change from what we saw before, and they were asked to come back with some revisions, and they have. But I'll be happy to take any questions that you may have, and we can move back to any of these slides that you wish.
Is there any way to put them side by side to get, immediate comparison between Exhibit A and Exhibit B, or?
Well, that's a really good question, and I bet BJ, if we put BJ to work on that, he could do that. But it might take a moment.
Here, is it better there? And I'm going, I don't know.
Right, and truthfully, at least from the best I can tell, there's not a great deal of difference between these two, except for that top band of metal.
Really?
And that does make a difference, obviously, in the percentage of brick.
BJ, can you work your magic? Working on it. Okay. We need a little
And-
BJ magic music going on here.
Then there's the question of the rear of the building, which if we're willing to say that that's not going to be identified as the primary entrance so that they meet the one standard, then what you have is an all-metal facade on that rear. Check that out.
I know, BJ, so.
That's a good juxtaposition. You can see,
Yeah, because you go, you see all those and you go up here and you're like,
yeah, what did I
Yeah.
see before?
Okay. Yeah. All right. Questions for Pam? We do have that.
So you're saying, I mean, to me, I want to make sure that what's facing 22, like, looks the nicest that we could think. The other part, I mean, I guess, would we need to do a deviation if we're agreeable with fine, it looks fine, it's 3%, it's not compliant, but it's going to be the front, the back, you'll just help us figure out what we need. I mean, 'cause my biggest focus is this, like, what's facing the big
Right.
street. That's what most people are going to see. Most people probably aren't even going to this building, it's a private office. They're largely just going to see it from the street.
We've, of course, I've been here since April, and what I've been seeing with these architectural reviews is that the ordinances need some work. And it puts us all in a position of asking an applicant to be at 100% compliant with something that we're not sure is exactly what we want to see anyway. So staff works very hard to try to gain that compliance, and then they come here and you're placed in a position of, are we looking for 100% compliance, or are we looking for something that works?
I mean, I like that first one, like my opinion, and I think that with the old Waterworks building, there's some break there to where it's not like the 100-foot square box that we try to avoid with some of the deviations or the.
Metal band.
I like the one on the bottom right.
The bottom
personally.
right, that's.
The metal band one was the top, but
Right.
it's open to, because it still has the metal things in the middle of it. Like,
And there is a narrow metal band at the top on the one on the bottom right. It's just that it's narrower, it's smaller, it takes up less of the percentage of the facade, and that actually, it's a 95% brick front facade on that one.
Yeah, I prefer bottom right also. And I don't have a problem with the back, whatever, being.
I actually prefer the one up top, and I hate it. But
Too.
I think the wonderful thing that's at work here is the issue of percentage compliance. That, is this to be the letter of the law, so to speak, or is this to be an artistic opportunity? And I perceive and I understand the deviation to be something that could actually contribute to making something more beautiful rather than locking someone in. So, but yeah, I'm willing to go with the bottom right if necessary.
I'm interested in the overview of the property itself and how far back the parking lot goes. Is that possible to tell me or not?
The site plan is not in this presentation. I have it on my computer, and it's in the folder, BJ. And of course, Mr. Bowles might be able to answer that right off the cuff. Has to do with the parking lot and what's
How
the,
far back on the overview of the property? We had the overview of the property cleared. How far back does the parking lot go behind the building?
I would assume it goes all the way back to the tree line, 200. Yeah, 200 feet. It's like 200 feet, because there's going to be actually two more buildings that eventually will be built at the back. And one of them's actually the one there that you're seeing on the lower right will be on your agenda for next month. We keep pushing it out till we get approval on this one because of consistency. We want consistency on the building designs and the facades.
Yeah, I too am interested in consistency, and I know there was a commitment made that part of that would be, part of this land would be kept protected as an environmental park.
Yes, ma'am. There's a good portion of this property that is wetlands.
Wetlands.
Right.
That can't be developed.
all of that hatch pattern that you see?
So,
And BJ, maybe you would want to.
and nothing is protected but for the wetlands, is that correct? What you have to protect, you're protecting, but you have not, there's not been a contribution of land
That I can't speak
for
for.
green
Civil
space.
engineer's not here.
How many employees does Sierra Nevada employ?
Maybe 85.
85? Okay. Then they got to park somewhere.
Yeah, and I'm okay with the parking that accommodates the property. I'm not okay with the fact that there was talk of a green space that has apparently been forfeited to more buildings. Okay. You can address that when, sorry? Okay.
Yeah, I think you maybe he's talking about a conservation easement, which had everything to do with those wetlands.
Right.
Actually, no, but not a green space or additional open space.
Okay. Well, I'll be ready.
Unfortunately, I think at the last time we saw this, I was really focusing in on the brick percentages and the other architectural standards. At the last meeting, I believe I had an exhibit that came from the CDP possibly even, that showed layout of other buildings that is subject to change, but I think it gives you a little bit better sense of how much land will not be developed there. Now, I'm not privy to the conservation.
Is the total? And you know how many acres, how much land do you own?
Approximately 17, 18 acres and possibly more. But of the 25, I think it's 25, 29, 28 acres, over 70%, I think, is not being developed ever.
Okay. You're welcome to come forward.
Any questions for me right now? I won't go far.
We know. You can't go far. I think Andy travels in threes.
And there's the brick that Andy's proposing.
Oh, okay. Can you pull, yeah, much, because the light is hitting it, and it,
Oh, you can pass it around.
okay. It's brick.
My name is Andy Bledgy.
Yes, it is.
From Member Manager Patah LLC.
Brian Bowles with Neil Smith Engineering.
Neil Smith with Neil Smith Engineering.
Malcolm? Yeah.
Okay, what we did from the last meeting was the brick, we added brick so we comply with that. And it's a kind of a specialized brick. It's a ceramic brick. It's a very high-end brick. So it matching with the panels.
The first words, what kind of brick?
It's ceramic.
Ceramic, okay.
Yeah, it's a brick that's fired and then it's got a ceramic on top. So it has a sheen that kind of, I can put it next to the brick to really kind of see. You have to go out the sunlight and stuff, but it's
Like show and tell, huh, Andy?
you want to be Phil in touch. Anyway, like that. And then the glass, let me put that. The glass, which is a major component of the exterior of the building, it's, anyway, yeah, we gave you two designs. I was just pointing out that if we add just one layer of brick to the top, this top option 2, it goes to 80%. It's like 78% right now. The client, our client personally likes option 2 the best, which is the top option. But they honestly defer to you guys if you like one so much better.
I got the impression you just made a compromise. So you were talking option 2 with another layer of brick. Is that what you just said?
No, well, if you need 80%, we put one layer of brick on there and it goes to
Okay.
80%. Another course. Yeah.
Okay.
So it complies. We can get it to comply if that's a major issue. But they like option 2. The reason being, it doesn't show up in that rendering very well. But the panel here has got a deeper reset in it, and the deeper reset gives it more definition on the front to distinguish different parts
Oh,
of it.
instead of being just straight up and down,
Yeah.
okay.
The windows themselves set
Gotcha.
back. How far are those windows set back?
Those windows set back about 17, 18 inches from the face of the brick. And then the panel will actually
okay,
set
so
back
there's-
about another 3 or 4 inches from the
Okay,
face of the brick.
that does
So there is
help.
some depth change there.
I guess
Yeah,
Taylor could
it's
see
got a
it.
lot of depth change on the sides there.
And
Yeah.
the horizontal break there, where the panels are, just above the small windows, but below the big windows, those are outlined in brick and then inlaid with this metal panel.
Gotcha.
So it's not solid panel, a metal panel across there.
And we're looking at 2 options for that to define it more, to get it defined into it. So it's got some texturing to it. Once we put the plants in front, it'll hide pretty much most of that first layer. So it kind of goes up and, but it'll soften it. In other words, one of the issues that you have in the UDO is to not get a solid blocks. That's being more defined by the definition of the windows going in and out, the panels going in and out, and also by the landscaping itself, and the waterfall.
Option two, I like that better. I like the movement.
Yeah.
And it's not big and blue. It looked like a Smurf before.
Yeah, we tried the best to get the colors, but you can see the colors quite a bit different. It also changes in the sun. Also, the way the ceramic brick works, it's,
There's a sheen.
yeah, you're supposed to look at this about 15 feet back, but it changes all the time. I had it in my office and it changes during the day. Sometimes it looks black, sometimes it looks blue, but it's kind of goes back and forth.
But it doesn't look like a Smurf.
No, hopefully not. Let's see.
That's what it looked like to me. I'm sorry.
No, do you guys have any other questions you'd like
Any
to ask?
other questions for the team?
Oh, one other thing I would like to point out, it was last time, the reason the colorations, this brick, I think I even have one. This has been used in Southern Pines before in various buildings. This is one across from the library. But the brick color, it looks good with the red brick that's there. So it defines it. So that's why this brick was also chosen and the metal panels were chosen. So to define out, this is the old building, this is the new building, and they're very distinctly different. But the same thing, they have some blending together.
Complement each
Yeah.
other. Gotcha.
And it's also been used before in Southern Pines, so we didn't think you could complain too much. This is across from the library. This is the
Anderson
Anderson
Architecture
Architecture,
Office.
yeah. But it's been used on
Taylor's old office.
a couple of buildings. It's been used on a couple of buildings and been used previously in town. But anyway.
So choose a plant. I see how that goes.
Also, one question came up last time because our renderings weren't very good. All the fences are out of brick
you.
too, so,
Yeah, that was another.
yeah. So, but they're all brick. And all the fire escapes are metal.
Okay.
And they don't have that gate thing on the front. Sorry about that. It was
Yeah,
still in
that
the same
was-
rendering. Yeah,
Was there something about the fencing and the gate that you talked about it last month?
yeah, that's not how it actually
It was
looks.
Okay.
It was last month, it kind of like was a metal thing. It's not, it's all brick. And it's actually going to be tighter than that. We have a generator set in back there. It's only painted yellow on the renderings to identify it as generator. It's actually not going to be yellow. It's going to be black. So you won't see it that much. And also it's about half that size. So, and it sits underneath the steps, so you won't even see it. So the brick is just going to be for screening that generator.
Okay.
So.
So do we lean towards two?
You can approve both. We can let the client decide two if you want, or you can say, we like better two or better one. Either one. We're open to all of them.
There's a definition of coming in.
There's something that breaks it up.
Breaks it up
makes
instead
feel
of being-
less like a
yeah.
one big solid building.
It didn't look like it was that much of a difference before.
It will, when you're coming down the hill, I don't know if we have, do you have the other side view on the other side? One of the reasons that we decided to go with the metal, see how the metal wraps into the other building? That's one, on this side. This is the side you're coming down from Southern Pines over to the traffic circle. It just looked a lot better to us because you're coming down the hill. It has a nice pitch up. The sign would be, we're going to be putting in for the sign permit, kind of like that. So it just edges into the other top and it just looks a little bit better.
And this will employ 85 people, this building employs 85 people?
Yeah, it's, and they're all, I don't know how the best way to say it, they make a lot of money. Yeah, but this one's employs 85. The other building you'll be looking at next month is a flex space building. It's kind of on the concept of it's where you can rent one or two offices at a time for any length of time. And that's actually kind of to support this building. In that this is going to be, the way it's looking, this is going to be kind of an incubator for Southern Pines. It's where people can move in with one. And just so you know, the S&C team, they started here, I rented one office originally, and now they're up to 85 employees. So that was less than 5 years away.
They had that when our sister city in Nuri, you remember that, Reagan? They had taken a warehouse and they had done the incubator situation. And I remember one person did so well, they became an international company.
Yeah,
Because they
but
just
that's
needed,
kinda like
they just
this,
needed a foot in the door, kind
I
of
have
thing.
5 people who we rent to right now that have gone from 1 employee, and this one's at 85, the other one's at 32, the other one's at 22. And so, yeah, that's happening in our market. So
Right.
that's kind of where
Okay.
this is why we're developing buildings like this.
I see. They both are better than what we saw last time.
Smurf.
I guess the only reason I linked to the first one is the first thing we saw, like first, it was just very shiny for Southern Pines, which is probably why that first option to me was like, okay, it's going to have less shiny on the front of it. So it's going to be a little closer to what we're
I
used
guess is
to.
anybody anti 1 or 2 and then the client could decide, or is
Well,
there?
they already said they liked probably the second one, but
The other thing, the sun comes up on, a few more things about the site if you're interested, but the sun comes up behind it and then drops in the front. So we didn't want to do any reflection that you would reflect from the road. The other thing about this building is kind of unusual. This would not be allowed to be built today because of the setbacks, and the front building would, because it's so close to the road and the road's going to be wide, and so it's tight.
Right.
And so we're trying to get something that you could see, like what he was saying, it wasn't a glaring either direction coming at you, so.
Anyone strong, I guess, against one option, or just let the client decide 1 or 2?
I appreciate the revisions.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate you. You really went back to the drawing board. You listened and, yeah,
They,
much improved.
they did tell me from Texas and from, it says, yeah, we're good with either, whatever they want. They want to be good citizens, so, yeah. So
Okay. All righty.
I will be there next week because of the first one, so I'll see you then.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all coming. All right, Jennifer?
Is that yours? Is this yours?
Oh, Andy?
Is that yours? Good evening, Jennifer again. Hi. So I will be presenting on AR 1422, which is known as the Lux for the architectural compliance permit. This is also a continuation from last month. And these applicants have also done really well to address the comments from last time. This is where the property is located in the planned development district of Morganton Park North. And this is along South Carlisle Street and Patriot Boulevard. It's outlined in red. So the applicant did, I didn't go over this deviation yet, but they did provide 2 different types of building colors. So this is type 1 building colors. There are 3 buildings total. So this is what it looks like. This is the different materials that they're going to be using. And the applicant is here tonight and can address this in more detail. This is the type 2 building colors. So they are trying to use different colors brick to make it more different when you're looking at one building to the other, so they don't all look the same.
One is building 1 and this is building 2? Is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
so this is the type 1 building colors.
Okay.
Now, if we look at the type 2 building colors, that is what it's gonna look like. So
Okay.
it's creating differentiation between the buildings so they don't have the same.
But they're complementing each other?
Yes, correct. So this is what the back will look like. And then here are the specific materials that they're going to be using for the type 2 building colors. This is their garage, which is the same as what I presented last time. These are the other materials from what I had presented last time that they'll be using as well. And this is their only deviation that they're requesting. So they did really well to meet all of the other issues that I had presented on last time, which one of them, for example, was the balcony. They had met that standard. So they did really well to address everything, but technically because 4.10.8 says include variations in heights, color, setback, roof lines, trim, and building sizes to create visual diversity between structures, they would have had to meet all of those requirements, but they did their best to create the different colors so that there is differentiation in the colors between the buildings. However, because they didn't meet every single one of those requirements, and because it says and, technically they would have to request the deviation. But everything else they had met, or they're compliant with. And that concludes my presentation.
Anybody have any questions for Jennifer?
And the applicant also has a presentation they would like to do.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. If you would state your name for us and welcome.
Casey King. I'm with Morganton Park 2, who's the owner of the property, as well as Cavendish and Cates, who's the general contractor.
Mark Mills, Planworks Architecture, and project architect for this project.
Okay.
Okay, so like Jennifer said, we went back, listened to your comments, made the changes to be more compliant with the UDO. We do have one UDO deviation because we don't meet all the details that were stated there. So I also included here a better picture of the brick colors, so you can kind of see a little bit better versus the 2D
Yeah, thank you
rendering.
for the
Yeah.
the comparison.
So they are complementary brick colors that are made by Triangle Brick, so they will correspond with one another. They're also the same brick colors that we used on our Legends building, so they'll correspond and go nicely with those buildings that are next door.
Okay.
So of course, in the UDO, the items we don't meet is the building height. The three buildings will all be the same height. The roof line is also the same, as well as the trim and building size, but our setbacks, as you can see on the second picture, are different since the buildings are oriented differently on the site plan. So like Jennifer showed, I just included these renderings. So this will be our type 1 building colors, and then this will be the second one. You can see we did the light, or more of the darker vinyl with the lighter brick, and a lighter vinyl with the darker brick.
Two of the first one, and that one, the one in the middle will be that one.
Yes, so we would do two with the darker brick and one with the lighter brick, but if you would like to see two with the lighter brick, we're also open to that as well. We like both bricks, so whichever.
They're attractive.
So this is also the exterior building selections. Of course, everything else will be black and white to complement those as well. And then just so you could see it in comparison to the Legends, which is our neighboring property. Again, the Lux is going to be a phase 2 of this project, and residents will have access, between the projects as well. So we did really want to design a building that complemented one another, so it did look cohesive between the two.
Okay.
And then I also included this so you can see the proximity of the Lux to our Legends project, as well as what those buildings look like. That's just another. Yeah, so that's the Legends project as well. So, any questions?
I don't think so. Anybody have any questions? Okay. Thank you. Do they need to return? Are we good? Okay.
Return, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next is AR 1522, Patrick's Point. That is Pam also. Thank you.
BJ, anyone, when will we see some sort of landscaping around these buildings or on the property? Does that come by us?
Site plan.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Pam.
And before we take off on this one, I'm interested in, and I talked to BJ for a second before the meeting tonight. Why do we have the right-of-way possible abandonment on the agenda after the architectural review, when what happens on the right-of-way may impact the architectural review?
You want to talk about the abandonment, that we can't abandon something we don't own?
Well, again, it's your agenda meeting, and as far as at what order things arrive on the agenda, that is subject to change. This was a carryover from, I don't remember if it was, I think it was 2 months ago maybe at this point. So therefore, I imagine it just got placed along with the other architectural reviews on the agenda. But they are two separate items also,
Right.
as was discussed when this
You
came
understand my
through
question,
60
though?
days. I understand the question, yeah.
So I wonder if we could consider moving the right-of-way ahead of the architectural review. Would anyone else on the council object to that?
But we can't abandon that road, can we? Because it's not ours.
There's parts.
Parts. Okay.
Yeah, so I think it's an issue that may impact, right.
Yeah, all that you will be considering this month is a resolution of intent to abandon, which then sets a hearing on that abandonment the
Correct.
following month.
Right,
So
and I
that's where the
understand
order.
that, but I also think that that might impact plans and considerations. I think it would be fair to all parties concerned if we address the ROW before we address the architectural review. That's all I'm asking for.
Yeah, that's up to the council.
Does that not make sense to everybody, since it might impact, one might impact the other? So do right-of-way, just change, just
Just reverse the order.
reverse the order on the agenda, please.
Anybody?
Just to be clear, however, you will not be making a decision on the right-of-way next Tuesday night.
I understand
You will be making a
that.
decision to have a hearing the following month. So unless your intent is to hold off on making a decision on the architecture, the order doesn't necessarily make a difference next week.
Well, I mean, if I may, what's being contemplated is the passage of a resolution of intent to vacate a section of town right-of-way and set a public hearing. So your question is about the order of operations. If, again, if you put one in front of the other, it doesn't really matter too much which one's on the agenda, because if it's, the town council could make the decision to pass a resolution of intent to vacate a right-of-way and set a public hearing the following month.
Right.
Or the town council could decline the opportunity to pass a resolution of intent to vacate.
With a hearing to follow.
So-
Right.
So those two
Either way.
actions are really, those are the actions.
Right.
the options.
And I think a sense of fairness to, number one, the developer, and number two, constituents, as to, I think you need to discuss, we need to discuss right-of-way and the abandonment or lack thereof of abandonment needs to give everybody notice, even if there's not a hearing. I understand that too.
That's fine, and again, that's all council business, which order stuff goes, no, the only, from the mechanics of it, sometimes when you have a concurrent review of, let's say, a plan amendment, a zoning amendment, and a special use permit, and they're all coming through concurrently. Sometimes what happens is if the plan and zoning amendment get denied,
Right.
well, it negates the reason to even move forward with the special use permit, because special use permits have to comply with zoning.
Correct.
The zoning, so therefore, okay, in this particular case, I wouldn't see it as, if the town council, let's say, were to choose not to pass a resolution of intent to vacate and set a public hearing, I
Right.
would not interpret it as, ye may not move forward with consideration of an architectural compliance permit.
That.
Okay.
But I also think it might impact architectural decisions that others made.
Yeah. that's-
So I think
that's great.
I think it's fair notice.
Great, and I just wanted to make sure it was clear that in case it was the assumption, like, well, we need to see what happens with a resolution of intent.
No, I understand that.
Before we can consider an AR, I see the two as functionally different enough, it has other implications and ripple effects, but in terms of a procedural matter at that meeting, one wouldn't negate the ability to consider the other, if that.
And I'm interested in notification to all parties about the ripple effect, as you so aptly call it. So I think it makes sense for the agenda for next week to talk about right-of-way first and our intent, and I understand that's a hearing that's set off for a month, I get that, and then architectural review next, but it sort of puts everybody on notice where the council's coming from.
I apologize if I confused things last time we discussed it. I think I was talking, or during our meeting said something to the applicants that I had no interest in forfeiting the right-of-way unless we had architectural, I mean, so maybe I added something that confused things.
Yeah, which comes first,
I tend to confuse myself just fine without your help.
chicken or the egg?
But I also think it's really important that we acknowledge that a right-of-way is not a done deal. And maybe it is if there's a vote to do that and to move forward with it, but I don't think it's fair to any party concerned that we pretend like this is a done deal on the right-of-way.
I'm okay setting the right-of-way hearing and then architectural review. I'm okay with that order.
Great, thank you.
Bill? Fine?
No problem.
Okay, so that's where we are. Okay? So, with that being said, should we talk to Patrick's point, or?
So we just swapped D and E essentially on the agenda, and the only
Correct.
question becomes whether you wish to move just this evening forward with the architecture from a staff report standpoint, or if we want to go right to right-of-way and then come back to the architecture.
I prefer to go right-of-way first with whatever information folks have on that.
All right.
Okay. Keep up with these. So,
I think BJ's getting to the portion of the packet.
okay.
Okay, so bear with me on this one. It could get a little confusing.
Okay, welcome, James.
BJ,
No, this is James, and he is our town engineer.
oh, sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. BJ, if you want to scroll down, let's start with the map.
This map or the other one?
The one that they provided with the orange and the blue. So as you're probably aware, we are discussing two different sections of right-of-way with this request. The first, I'll kind of gloss over this one because I think it's somewhat simpler, is the Mechanic Street right-of-way, which is there shown in blue. That's adjacent to the section shown there in yellow that was abandoned, I think it was around 2017, or is it 16? Was previously abandoned as part of discussions about a different project. So that right there is a right-of-way that is currently being requested to be abandoned. And, essentially all the parties have agreed that that is a town right-of-way. There's no real questions associated with that one. So that one is simply a question to council whether they wish to set the hearing or not set the hearing. The one that becomes more interesting, depending on how you want to put it, is the Rhode Island right-of-way. And we have spent a fair amount of time going back through the old deeds and doing the research and trying to figure out what exactly is this right-of-way. And what we found is that essentially the road was likely created sometime in the 1920s. It was done either by Mr. E.H. Mills or a Knollwood Incorporated or Knollwood Development Corporation. They have a deed that references a very old plat from the 20s that kind of shows this area and a much broader area around it. That was eventually sold to Mr. W.B. Davis, who was the one who eventually sold off all the properties that became Village in the Woods, Village by the Lakes, in those areas. As part of those deeds, there are references to public right-of-ways, utility easements, things like that. So we looked at that because one of the first things we have to check is, was there a dedication ever made? If the road was never dedicated to the town, then the town never could have accepted it. I think we checked that box. There were references, there's a plat, so I do believe a dedication occurred for that right-of-way. Where things get trickier is, was there any act by the town to then accept that dedication? That becomes the second step. If the town never accepted the right-of-way, then that right-of-way is really not a thing for the town to deal with. And what we've gone back through, we've done searches through the old council meeting minutes. We never found anything that is an explicit, i.e., council explicitly took an action stating that they are accepting this right-of-way. That is one of the typical or common ways that that could occur. One of the other ways, it's an implicit exception that can be done by any number of ways, but essentially it is some action by the town to show control, provide maintenance, or do something through that right-of-way to imply that they have accepted it and it's now theirs to maintain, and so on. We were not able to actually find any evidence that the town ever did anything in this area. There was a,
You never accepted this road?
that is my opinion at this time. There was a dirt road back in 1939 before US 1 came through. You actually can very clearly see the image of the road. Let's see if BJ can find it. So head. All right. So you see Pennsylvania PD comes down, a bunch of big swoops, and then curves right through there. So that right there is actually what is Rhode Island. That is a dirt road. At the time in which it was platted, it was not in town, but eventually was brought into the town limits. See, this is a cool map. I don't know if anybody's seen this a whole lot. This has been living in the back room of engineering for quite a while, and we've stumbled across it. But here you can actually see that section of Rhode Island kind of has that curve on the map. So one of the interesting things we found about this is Rhode Island's not actually a straight road. It curves, and if you compare that to later imagery, I don't know if anybody's like me, always wondered, why is there a service road entrance in the middle of a service road with nothing? Well, if you actually go back and look at it, the service road entrance intersects where Rhode Island actually hit US 1 when it was built. That right there is actually the remainder or the little bit of Rhode Island when US 1 was actually built. So, but yeah. So, but knowing that there was a dirt road there, we have the ability to go back and look at the old Powell Bill records. And Powell Bill maps, the oldest one we have goes back to 1952. In 1952, the town had claimed Rhode Island, I think it was up through the 200 block. So quite a few blocks away from this area. And as time progressed and we look at newer and newer Powell Bill maps, it never actually made it down this far. The Powell Bill map basically stops at the section where Rhode Island ends now, which is, a couple hundred feet short of that intersection with Rhode Island and Mechanic. So looking at all of that, conferring with Doug to make sure that we're all on the same page with this, it is our opinion at this time that right-of-way was never accepted by the town. And without an acceptance, this is not a right-of-way that the town should or even could take an action.
Because we don't own it.
Correct.
It's hard to give away something we don't own.
James, it says C Exhibit B on the previously revoked deed book, 1911, page 93, C Exhibit B in parentheses. Is Exhibit B actually included anywhere? Or can it be included in next
If
week's?
it's not in there, yes, we can very easily. BJ, if you can pull up that thumb drive file, just so people can see it.
In my experience, deed books from 1911 are not easy to read. But if you'll include it with next week's packet or somewhere that the town can see it and we can see it as well, I think that'd be appreciated.
Oh, well, no, 1911 is not a date.
Oh.
That's the deed book.
That's better, thank you.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
that revocation actually,
1920.
that is the revocation document right there. It was a 2002 error, I believe. So, yeah, very much more recent than any of the older documents we were just looking at.
Never accepted the property described. We were a village. Yeah. I always correct people, but goodness.
And that's not in our packet, right?
Not currently, but we can very easily add that.
That's interesting.
Should we have no one for it? Okay.
Yeah, the reference to the deed book and page is on the exhibit that was provided by the applicant. It's right there.
That's where you got the 1911, I'm sorry. Okay.
So with that, I will take any questions.
So the blue on either side of the yellow is still right of way,
Correct.
right? As is the red, or yes, no?
The red is currently, they are showing that as if the right-of-way were to be abandoned.
Contiguous owner there.
Yeah, it would be the 50% one way, 50% to the other owner.
And who's the owner to the right of the red?
I believe, off the top of my head, that is Silver Ridge Holdings, which is part of the Gano Properties.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great, thank you. Very helpful.
Based on that, what you will note is that the draft resolution calling for the public hearing in your packet references Mechanic Street specifically, but does not reference Rhode Island. And BJ's got that up on the screen now.
So I guess my question is, the resolution of intent to vacate sounds very much like it's presumed, oh, it's going to be vacated, but it's before the public hearing. So this, if this is approved, it just means there's going to be a full open meeting, hearing, discussion, for or against next month. Even though the wording of this kind of, it seems to be from one-sided.
The wording is, yeah, it's simply, it declares the intent to give public notice that a hearing will be held on it, at which time anybody for or against that can come out and speak at the hearing. Yeah,
It sounds
Clean slate,
presumptuous.
presentation, decision at that point. Okay.
right.
Clarify what BJ was talking about earlier, if council chose not to set a hearing because they don't wish to vacate, then basically there is no resolution at that point. So you really, there's only a resolution if you wish to set the hearing. If you don't wish to set the hearing, there is no further action, there is no resolution. That's why you only see one version.
So if you don't want to vacate, you don't set a hearing?
Correct.
Right.
I think to clarify for the general public, I think we should have a public hearing. Just to have your explanation also. Because it's confusing to most people anyway. And I'm sure y'all had fun chasing rabbits down all these little trails. For those who enjoy digging in the basement.
I can honestly say it is by mere luck I found a lot of this information. The plat, that's probably the most important to a lot of this discussion, it's not referenced with a map book and page in any of the actual deeds. I happen to know it existed because I was doing property research around Bowling Spring Lakes, which is also included in that map. and I did that like 2 years ago for some other reason. I just happened to have in the back of my mind that I'd seen that map before. I was able to go back and find it again. If I hadn't done that previously, we would not have found half of what we have here. I got lucky, and I'm not afraid to admit it.
So to be clear, we're not taking action now, but at next Tuesday's meeting, we can decide if we want to set a public hearing, correct? Okay. All right, I'm okay with keeping it on the agenda is item D and moving forward if everyone else is.
Bill, you look like you want to say something.
Sounds like some questions for next month, so I will wait.
Okay.
I assume the applicant will be here next month if there are any questions.
Either one, but
Okay.
Or, sorry, next week.
Next and next, okay.
Yeah.
So now that we've done all this, I guess now we're talking about, I guess we're going to architecture review 1522. And it's Pam. Shocking.
Thank you. Again, this was a continuation, so there have been some changes. And Mr. Kerry Finley, who's the project architect, is here also and can answer questions. So I'll roll through this. I handled this the same way that I did the waterworks in your staff report, at least with just pointing out in bold red what was new.
I like the way you do that, and I thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome. It was really self-serving to a large degree because I didn't want to start from scratch with a staff report, but
But it does help us to realize what was said and what's been done, so we can, so thank you.
well, I'm glad I made that clear, and let's hope that we can make this as clear. What Mr. Finley has done is provided, he has broken this down really into 5 building types, and that includes 4 of the multifamily buildings and the clubhouse, which are under review for the architecture this evening. And so, and they all vary to some degree in the architectural standards. So we'll roll through this, and of course, he's here to answer questions. First, regarding the exterior building materials, which was something that was discussed when he was here last time, have listed the, bless you, the brick percentages here, sort of at the center of the screen. And there have been some changes. We're still looking at, of course, less than 80%. And I will say that Jennifer and I now have a formula to provide to applicants for how to calculate this, exclusive of windows and doors, which seems to throw folks off. So we've made it very clear how to get down to the percentage that we're looking for. Okay. And with that being said, you can see what we have here, and we're not at 80% on any of them, but they do vary between each building type. And these are the new elevation drawings that Mr. Finley provided, and here on the right side, we're showing what those percentages are. There's a lot of variation in the sort of exterior appearance of each building. The top one is the front elevation, bottom one is the rear, and then the 2 sides are in the center. And then he provided renderings. This would be building number 1, the front. So this is building number 2, which is also an apartment building, but it's designed a little bit differently. It has a different number of bedrooms in the units. And these are his elevation drawings. It follows the same pattern that you just saw, the front at the top, rear at the bottom, the 2 sides in the middle. And we're at 62 or 66% brick on each of these. And here are the renderings that reflect this building type. Building 3 is again an apartment building, just different different unit layout. So it affects the sort of the massing of the building, and same layout here, but we're looking at 62, 64, and 68% brick on these facades. And here's the renderings that he provided of this building. And of course, we can go back to any of these that we need to. This one represents a different, I guess more substantially different building type in that it's the townhome buildings.
That's the one that's closest to Village in the green, is that correct? Okay, yes, I'm getting yes, the two-story version, yeah, okay.
That's right, the two-story version. It includes front entry garages. And we do have higher percentage of brick on this one compared to the others everywhere with the exception of the front. And the white, I believe most of the white that you're looking at here is a white brick.
It's more of a cream color that washes it out more, so it won't be as white as that.
Might show up better in the renderings, which we'll look at here.
So the white, quote unquote, we're seeing is brick?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right at either end.
Is this the building that was like all red brick and we said it looked like a prison? Okay, sorry. Or NC State, I think that's what I probably said.
And other views of the front. Clubhouse was also reviewed, and here are your percentages on the right. This is adjacent to the pool and ranges between 51 and 61% brick. And the renderings. We talked last time about some of the other sort of different architectural standards besides the brick percentages. And one of those standards in section 4.10 has to do with windows and doors comprising at least 25% of the building, the street-facing facade, between 2 and 10 feet above the grade. And we've verified that the proposal is compliant with this requirement for all buildings. The next one has to do with the articulations. We talked about this a little bit, I think in more depth at the last meeting, having to do with basically breaks in the plane of the facade. And really all of the buildings meet the standard with the one exception of the townhome buildings, the front and rear facades being 58 feet in length, and there are no projections as this standard requests or requires. One of the changes had to do with the sizes, the dimensions of the balconies, and we have confirmed that they do now comply with the minimum dimension of 6 by 10 feet. And I did not think that was my last slide, but we were close to the end. BJ, can you see if you can scroll down to... Perhaps it was, yes, that was the last slide. So with that being said, of course, Mr. Finley can come up and answer any questions that you may have for him. There have been some changes on this one. This one is different than deviations that were allowed having to do with building height. For other apartment projects that we've had are not allowed here because this was a special use permit. And so there was a very significant change early on in the progression of the designs that eliminated sloped or peaked roofs for the apartment buildings, and they had to go with flat roofs. So that was a very significant change to bring it into compliance with the building height requirement. So now we're just looking at the specific architectural standards.
Okay.
There are, I want to mention, some accessory buildings planned for, and they include a garage building, a mail kiosk, and a pool building, which appears to be more of a service or,
It's the restrooms and.
okay. Those are all less than 3,500 square feet. The UDO states that those don't come before council for architectural compliance permit, but that they are reviewed by the planning director at the building permit stage. So I spoke with the chief building inspector today, and he stated that those buildings are typically built to a 1 and 2 family residential code standard, and so they would be exempt from architectural review in any case. Questions?
Questions for Pam?
So none of the buildings at this point are in compliance with the 80% brick.
They are not. We had one facade previously that was at 80 or a little bit over 80, and they've all dropped back as the design has
Okay.
been refined.
Thank you, that's all.
So, I guess, Carrie, you're up. If no one has questions for Pam.
I do have a question for you, Mayor. Could we please have a 5-minute break?
Oh, sure. don't have any gavel or squat be nimble. Okay, please introduce yourselves.
I am Kerry Finley with Finley Design.
Is that on?
It is now. I'm Kerry Finley, architect with Finley Design, Architecture and Interiors, with the architect for this project.
And Logan Burnett, the developer with 1700 LLC.
Okay. Ready to go?
Sure.
Okay.
Now, I'm not getting this to move back and forth. There we go. Now it's moving. So in comments we've heard before, it sounded like it would be useful to see a little more context and some overall kind of view. So we added a few of those for the meeting here today. So as you're coming into the project, you can see the clubhouse and you can see the street that we're creating with the apartments behind. We focused the most heavily red brick facade for the clubhouse facing the main street. You have the pool. It has sort of a campus feel with apartments that are adjacent to that. Again, the white here, this is really washed out. The white brick is actually going to be more of a cream kind of color, so it'll be not as whitewashed as this looks right there. And then every building, of course, we've got different sort of breezeways. So we have the different breezeways designs for each side, so it has a nice feel, more of a street feel. And then showing you in context when you see this street with the townhouses as they lead up to the apartments in the background, so you can see the division of the building, sort of the rhythm of that street and the pedestrian scale that we're working to achieve. So that's the additional stuff we brought today, just to kind of show you for context. Beyond that, I'm really just kind of happy to answer any questions that you have. I know there's some specific things we discussed on the townhouses specifically, based on comments and that you really didn't like them. We got rid of sort of the gable end and gave them more of a rectangular feel on the end. We changed the red brick to the light colored brick to give it a lighter area kind of feel to it and less institutional. We also did reduce the amount of brick on the end caps so that they were more in compliance with the rest of the buildings and had more detail, which in the siding gives us a little more contrast and detail. We've more than doubled the percentage of brick that we had previously and tried to get into the percentage of brick. So, and tried to get to a point where we feel like it isn't in the neighborhood of the other developments that have been done with apartments in the area, and to the point where additional brick may be detrimental to the look of the building as far as the mix of materials and things that we're trying to achieve.
We did talk about when you do 80, it can look very
It
institutional.
looks really institutional, and we'd like to maintain a nice, welcoming residential character to the project, and siding is a really nice piece of that. So.
Remind me how the balconies were too small. What?
They were actually not too small before. They just didn't have floor plans. So
Okay.
a lot of what we did this time was we just gave Pam more information and more detail
I knew there was
to
something
make sure
about
we're in
those.
compliance.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And one thing I will say on the townhouses, what she's talking about is this left side here, you see the 3 units side by side, the twos, sort of the cream. Right? That's 58 feet, but we also have a 5-foot porch on the front on the corner. So I was actually including that porch, so it was less than 50 feet from the porch to the other side. And so I looked at that as being the projection with the columns and the canopy that came out as projection. And that's how we'd interpret it. And we're welcome to, if we need to make a modification, consider that. But we were really trying to comply with this as much as possible. We also did step back 2 of the units in the middle, so you get that relief in the depth to make sure you have that 5-foot
And just
step.
straight across.
Exactly.
Right. Like a, yeah. Yes. Y'all listen pretty well.
That's what we try to do. Again, our goal here is to try and do a project you can all be proud of, that we're hoping to sort of set a new standard for how attractive these projects can look and for Southern Pines, and doing something that will be successful for our client long-term, that will look good long-term, and have a lot of nice visual interest to it and a lot more variety than you typically see in projects of this type.
When we talked, I had asked about doing a sight line from Village Green.
That is a really difficult thing to do, and that if I tried to show it, I would most likely get something wrong in the way it's illustrated, because with existing trees, It's hard for me to know exactly what those trees are with the photography and things of that nature. It's very difficult. If I showed you something, it would most likely not be very accurate. And so I decided it was probably best not to communicate something that would not be accurate. We're trying to be really careful with how we show this to make sure everything's shown clearly. So that's the
There
reason I
still is
didn't
the
do it.
80-foot.
Yeah, we still have the buffer, all that stuff there, so.
And Mr. Friendly, there's still between the Village Green and these townhouses, is there still a smaller building back there, or is that, am I making this up? I'm
The
sorry.
furthest building back we have on the site, as far as when you get close to the Village Green, are these townhouses. That's it.
Okay. I have one more question about the looks. There is a place on several of the buildings where there's a horizontal awning that sort of cuts off an arched entryway. Was that done intentionally?
On the right.
It's on the right, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
but
actually,
and it looks like it's
so,
on every building.
yeah, and that's sort of the design we did. What we want to do is give you the sense of a taller entry, but we also wanted to make sure there's a sense of pedestrian scale and cover as you come into it. So those canopies are actually how we're getting, one of the ways we're getting some of the projections and requirement. And also just bringing that pedestrian scale down so that it is not, sitting too high.
Okay.
Since this is more of a residential scale, but we like the idea of sort of more like a 1.5-story opening that has a sense of grandeur to it
Yeah.
while still making you feel comfortable as you walk into it.
Yeah. And the arches look nice,
They do.
and the columns look nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a vast improvement.
Thank you.
It really is.
And we deliberately pulled in the columns from the clubhouse.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you can see them now side by side. So you can see we really tried to unify the whole project in that
Right.
way.
The connectivity between,
Right.
yeah, okay.
I think it has a really nice street feel as you transition from the apartments to the townhouses and move along. We're also flipping the building designs for the apartments. So you'll see these two in sequence, but then on the next one off the right to the right will actually flip it. So you get that sort of rhythm that kind of mixes a little bit. So, which for us is a simple, we can just rotate the building around to do that.
Okay.
And if this is the view coming in from US 1,
Yes. This
It's-
does not include any grading.
okay,
We're still working on that, so this is showing everything flat,
okay.
just to be clear.
The reserved office space, is that green lot on the
The
right?
green on the right is the outlot, yes.
Okay.
So that will have something on it at some point, I just don't know what it is.
Any other questions while they're here? No? I'm assuming you want them to come back? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate y'all being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Sure thing. Thanks for listening. Now we're talking about the electric vehicle charging stations.
Yes, I'll ask Jessica to come
Elise?
forward for that one. She's worked on that project.
I just have to say that you took those pictures. There was this picture at the playground while she was getting set up. There was this family that came up to me and said that they were reading a book about a mayor, and the little boy said, "Mommy, who's the mayor?" She does live in Cameron, and she goes, "Well, I don't know." So there was introduced as the mayor. She came up to me and she goes, Can you talk to him and say, because she goes, he'd like to meet the mayor. The little boy's name is Sterling, which is my daughter-in-law's last name. So I met Sterling and his little tiny sister, and she's very pregnant with another one. And so she happened to capture those 3.5 people in one of the things that was posted on that. I thought, oh my gosh, there's little Sterling. I thought that was so cool. Yeah, but it was just like his eyes got to be about this big. He's like he got to meet the mayor. I'm thinking, yeah, really, it's okay. But that was so cute. There was a book about a mayor, and I got to meet one. I thought, oh, that is so cute. Some good things about this this job. All right, take it away, charging station.
Well, good evening. I know it's been a few months now since we talked about the electric vehicle charging stations, and at that point, council, I don't know what this is every time I come up here.
That's your magnetic personality.
I kind of thought
We can turn ours off and see that.
At that time, council had expressed an interest in having staff work with Go Pines to identify some locations and work out an agreement, including a payment structure for them to install their charging stations. So just to kind of recap the work that we've done since then, we've identified 2 locations which are up on the screen. The first one is on Bennett Street. We have a town parking lot there, and we would like for them to install 2 charging stations there, which would serve a total of 4 spots there. And then this picture shows Reservoir Park, and they would put 1 charging station there that would serve 2 spots. We're currently looking at one of those spots being a handicap spot so that those patrons have the ability to park there. So they have, they've been doing some of their own background work. They've gotten with Duke and confirmed that they can make the infrastructure work out there. They provided us an initial agreement, which I've spent a lot of time going back and forth with them. Doug has recommended that we treat this as a lease agreement. And so the proposed agreement would be a lease for a total of 5 years for these 6 spaces. They are in agreement to pay us $25 per month per space. And then as soon as we sign off on this lease, then they would begin the work and ordering the equipment.
$25?
Yes, $25 per space per month. So that's,
It's not a percentage of the fees from the charging?
no, and actually, Reagan and I have done a little bit of research into that, and we've actually had some conversations about that, because we were initially kind of going down that path. And I actually reached out and had a pretty extensive conversation with my former city manager in Suwanee. Suwanee has municipal-owned charging stations in their downtown, and it was something that they paid to install, and they receive the revenues from the charging, and then they do all the maintenance. And at that point, Go Pines had offered the $25 per month to us, and Reagan and I, our initial thought was, okay, maybe that seems a little low. And so my former city manager, he's also continued to do a lot of research into charging stations, and he really advocated that that seemed like a reasonable amount. And one of the reasons he said that is because they've had a lot of downtime with their charging stations, just a lot of maintenance. Sometimes they're down for months, which means there's no fees coming in because there's no customers there. And so we don't know what type of revenues we could make. We also realized,
Is that kind of the nature of the animal in their downtimes? Or is that just that they have?
I mean, it's like anything that requires electricity, yeah. I mean, I don't know that it was a function of theirs or, whatever it is, but, things happen. And, with supplies right now, you may have a piece that gets broken and it can't charge, and you may be down for a few months. So, kind of hearing their, the conditions that they'd been operating theirs under, and learning that they really had not made much of any revenue, we reconsidered that. And our other thought too was that this is really a true public-private partnership where we've looked at the data. We know that the number of electric vehicles is growing exponentially each year. And we're at the point where we need to add more charging stations here in Southern Pines. We have 3 spaces, and if you go over there, they're almost all used all the time. We would have a total of 9. Yes, there'd be 7. Not currently, no. Yes.
Isn't there new legislative action that says we have to charge now? What?
Pending.
There's been a bill introduced. It has not
Right,
made its
okay.
way through both.
Okay.
And what that is that if a municipality were to install these and not charge, then I think the bill goes so far as to say we have to install a gas pump and not charge also.
so, right.
It could very well be that, and we've had some very initial discussion with Go Pines about one day maybe taking over those stations over there.
Okay.
It may be something that we come back and look to add that, particularly if the legislature were to take action, or we look at metering them and trying to charge ourselves. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to have to set up the back end stuff and the financial software and the chargers and all that stuff. And I don't mean electric chargers, I mean credit cards or whatever for 3 spaces.
So
It's
right
kind of
now, we have 3 spaces. It's free to plug in your car, and we, the town, pay for the electricity.
Yes.
And do we have an expense on that, James?
We do not. It's not. It was not separately metered when Duke Energy put those in as part of their project back in, was it 2013? We determined.
Yeah, and then I think they got replaced in maybe 2019, but yes.
Yeah. So it was not separately metered at that time. So it's actually just hardwired into the library. And no, we've not seen a giant spike in library electricity or anything, but it is
If
not.
possible, I mean, if this goes well, I mean, I think it'd be wise to try to remove those.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree at all.
I like your choice on Bennett Street because we can't get anybody in that parking lot. They show up there.
Yeah, no, Bennett Street's a great spot for these, so, right. So yeah, so after kind of working through all of that analysis, we felt like the $25 per space per month is reasonable because
How much would they, I'm sorry. I'm with Bill. I'm blown away by $25 a space. How much would they be charging for people to?
It's based on the
Use.
kilowatt of energy that they use. So, it would.
So I go in, I swipe my charge card,
Mhm.
and we have no idea what my bill would be unless we know kilowatts, right? I mean, we don't even know what a typical bill would be.
Yeah, I don't know. Because it could depend. I mean, it's going to depend on the type of vehicle that you
Right.
have, the
We don't
length of
have a
time that you
range.
charge.
You don't have a low end this, high end that.
They presented some data to us. Do you remember that? I don't off the top of my head. Yeah, I think I have some notes from a meeting we had with them. I'm trying to pull it up right now.
So look at it, that it is a service to our citizens.
Right.
Correct.
And that's another way. This is not money making.
Yeah, I mean, because
It's a service to
by looking, just at the data and how much. So the way that we can track electric vehicles is, how many are registered within Moore County. And as of March 22, there were 448 electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles. That was a 64% increase from March of 2021. And so, yeah, I mean, we're getting to the point where the town is going to have to respond in some way. And so either we're putting them in, and I think if we're putting them in, then we're going to explore charging for them at that point, which
Sure.
then means we have to provide staff resources to collect that and monitor that. And so our recommendation is that we let them do that, and they manage all the maintenance, they do everything, and we just are simply providing a public space, and we can say, we're now providing 6 additional electric vehicle spots.
position to increase if it's gone up 64%, we're gonna.
Oh, that's why,
Stop.
that's exactly
It's gone
why
up
he's wanting to get into
64%,
this. Yes.
Does he have the capacity to increase too?
He has talked to us, yes, he would like to increase in the future.
Okay.
Today, because we have to treat this as a lease, we have very specific notice requirements under state statutes. And we have to provide very specific notice that we are looking at 6 spaces. They are in these 2 locations, and that is all we can take action on at that point. So if we were to come back in 6 months or a year, we'd come back with a separate lease or a modification to this lease, and then we would provide notice again. And so,
Okay.
So that's what we're looking at today. That's what they're comfortable with doing today. But if it goes well, then,
Somewhere.
right.
So Doug, is this sort of going to be like a ground lease? He's going to pay to put that stuff in there, and then lease it, and then if the term runs out and it ends, then whatever's there stays.
I think the way it is written, and this is in part because of some of the grant funding, is that we've actually made it that it has to be removed unless he chooses to offer it to us and we accept it. And the reason for that is in 5 years' time, the technology may be outdated, and it would be to his advantage as opposed to ours to just walk away and leave it sit there if it doesn't have a residual value. So it's really kind of our option whether that gets removed or not.
I was kind of wondering about the extent to which the demand will decrease based upon portable home charging stations. You know, I mean, we don't have gas stations in our homes, but most of us have electricity, you know.
Right, right. Right. Yeah, no, I mean, as more and more homes, can accommodate this, of course, for some of our residents, are they going to charge if they drive from home to downtown? Yeah, probably not. But we also know that we have a lot of people that, come downtown from other areas. And, the way that you treat these types of chargers is almost like a phone charger. It's not like the gas station where you go and top off your vehicle and you're done. You go and get as much charge as possible. So if it brings you from 25% to 50%, that's great. So they're always looking for a place to go and just charge up a little bit. So even if they have them in their homes, they're still going to try to.
Right, because they're traveling.
We have phone chargers in our homes and we bring chargers to work,
And if you just heard Chatham County with the $4 billion VIN car plant that's going up just up the street, their electric cars are going to be the most common thing there is at this point. But I noticed you must have said $4 billion in Chatham County. I bet Chris is going crazy time. But anyway.
Yeah, there's some executive orders that have been signed by Governor Cooper in the past few years, and the most recent one sets specific goals to have at least 50% of the vehicles registered or actually sold in North Carolina be the zero emission electric ones. So, that's a big goal, and 2030 is not that far away. So it's definitely happening.
Jessica, I've got a question about the handicap spot. Is this on? Yeah. Yes. Is there an issue? So if it's taking up one of the handicap spots that's right outside Reservoir, is there an issue if a non-electric car but a handicap car needs to use the space?
Well, we would make sure that we're not eliminating all of the handicapped spaces. And in fact, we may replace the one that gets used for an electric vehicle with another, so that we would have the same number of handicap spaces that we do today. That's a decision that we need to make, but that was actually something I had asked him to do, because I said, what happens to a disabled person? They don't have a place to charge. And so that was something that we wanted to try there, so.
Yeah, we need to do that too.
And then I feel like on the interruption of service, I feel like 90 consecutive days is a lot of time for them to not have anything working. Yeah.
I know it feels long, but just knowing some of the repairs and some of the timelines that it takes to get different parts and things like that, I would hate to kick them out, just for something like that. So, our goal is to let them keep the stations there. And I mean, we have a lot of other built-in, kind of protections there that give us the ability to walk away from the lease. I think it's 60 days notice that we have to provide if it's just not working out well for us. So.
And clearly they have the greatest incentive to turn around any repairs as quickly as possible,
absolutely.
because they're not making any money otherwise.
I mean, to be honest, they have more of the risk here than we do, because they're purchasing, installing, maintaining. They have to come take them out. We're just simply providing a space.
If for some reason it were down and not operable, does the parking spot then become general population can park there, or is it? I mean, do we need to add some sort of like notice that if it's not working, can go back to general parking at least until they get it fixed. I hate to reserve, I guess they're paying for them,
Yeah,
but
what you're thinking, I'm trying to,
Reservoir has a limited
I'm
parking.
trying in my mind to contemplate how it would function relative to the signage that will be on the site and
Right.
ability to remove or cover. I guess you could
But that's a
bag the
good
sign or
question.
something temporarily, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I know.
We're trying to leave as much of the enforcement in their hands. You know, that's why I specifically said they need to put their contact information on there. We don't want them calling us and saying that
I don't want them
station's
calling
not
me.
working. So, you know, we also put, you know, initially they had asked us to tow non-electric vehicle. I said, no.
I mean,
You're welcome to tow if you provide appropriate notice, but our police are not going to be out there towing non-electric vehicles.
Bill,
so.
go ahead.
I mean, I used to work in downtown Pinehurst, and there used to be non-electric in those spots all the time.
Yeah.
So it's up to them, I guess, to figure it out, but we don't need to be.
It
enforcing
seems to
that.
be becoming more commonplace that people are respecting and they see the need now, and you see those open, you know, and not filled with non-electric. I think when they first came out, you know, it was somewhat of a novelty, and there were so few cars that people just ignored it.
Okay.
Sorry, in addition, does this, if we go on a monthly rental program for those parking spots, does it set a precedent that if somebody else wanted to do it, that either we are okay with this program, or can we change it to a
This is
fee?
not an exclusive franchise. If somebody else wanted to come in and make a proposal, it would be council's determination, decision. I mean, if, right now, this is to kind of kick it off and see how it's going. If, you know, in a couple years' time, if suddenly 50% of the cars running around here are electric and you feel the need to expand spaces, you could do it with Go Pines, or if you could do it with another company. This is not an exclusive franchise. It's just on those 6 spaces.
Okay. Well, I appreciate
I could
it's 5
foresee
years.
that we start having other companies contacting us in the future. It was actually hard to find any kind of agreement or any kind of precedent. You know, it seems like they might be in private parking lots, or it seems that the municipalities might own and maintain the chargers themselves, but I could find very little on what we're wanting to do here. So we're kind of blazing new
Yeah,
territory here.
it's the front end of all this. I mean, in
Yes.
the end, a lot of these, I think, probably end up in private lots because there will be retailers that want to, hey, if they park there, they'll walk in the front door type of thing. And you're seeing those pop up in more urban areas. But yeah, we're kind of on the front end of this. I know the county is looking at some options because I understand the most recent parking lot that they put in, they actually kind of wired it in anticipation of this. But I don't think they've made any final decisions about how they're going to go about it either. They're kicking around, I think, maybe doing their own program. And I think the more they kick that around, the more they might think there's better ways to approach it. But
Any other questions for Jessica?
Will Go Pines be there next week?
They can be, yes. They were out of town this
Okay.
week. And so I told them that I would go ahead and present. And if you had any questions, then we can follow up. You know, or I'm not going to be there next week. I'm going to be out of town. So if it's something that you'd feel more comfortable with both of us coming, well, actually, let me back up. Next week, all we are doing is adopting a resolution that publishes our notice of intent to adopt a lease. So you're not committing to anything next week. It's actually your September work session is when you will take action on the lease, because we have to provide a minimum of 30 days notice. And so yeah, there's opportunities to bring both of us back together and
just
ask more
says-
questions and to modify that agreement. So.
This just says we're considering.
Yeah, and we have to put very specific language in there. So if you're not comfortable with the $25 per month, that's something that we have to provide notice of. So I would need to know that before we run
I
the
I see
ads.
this in here, the notice that you've put in here.
Mhm.
At what point does it become locked in stone? So say we run this notice, somebody shows up and they're like, oh, I'm doing this 2 counties over,
Mhm.
$300 per space. I'm paying them $750 and happily give you that because it's great.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
the point of doing
Is
this.
that, at that point, we.
The
can be like,
agreement.
Okay, so we,
Yeah.
I mean, I doubt this is going to happen, but this would give that option.
this is just a resolution of intent to put the notice out there and provide opportunity for something like that to
All right.
potentially occur.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Next thing we have is petition for acceptance of roads within Ravensbrook subdivision. Is that BJ?
I think BJ's got this one.
So Ravensbrook subdivision, phase one, put in their streets. Then when they are done with everything, they have the subdivision process. They come in, they want their final plat, they bond for whatever is not complete. They then complete it. Then after they are done with construction of the houses and the town is satisfied that they're not going to rip up the roads anymore with construction traffic, then they can offer those roads for dedication to the town, and it's kind of like the very, 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 very last step of subdivision. If they're to be public streets, then we can accept them.
Okay.
So what's in it for us?
Public streets. James or Reagan, you want to take that one?
That's really pretty much the answer. And there are instances where at the time of a CUP for subdivision coming through, we have conversations around public versus private streets. There are times that we have made recommendations and council has in fact asked that the streets remain private. We will tend to make recommendations along those lines based on factors such as, do the streets connect with existing town right-of-ways versus just being out in the middle of nowhere or something? This is off of Wayner Road, a good portion of which the town accepted back when the town did the CDBG grants to run water and sewer throughout Wayner Road.
Okay.
Of course, it's right behind the fire station also, so we have an interest in the streets and things back in that area. This is actually one that, and I don't remember the entire history of it, but it has vacillated back and forth between public and private when it was going through the process. And at one point, there was even talk of maybe dedicating them to DOT rather than the town, but that was because there was thought that maybe the standards might be less, and we made it clear that wouldn't be the case.
So this is near the new fire station?
This is right behind the fire station. This is if you go out
near
to
the
fire
airport.
station number
Okay,
2,
Okay,
the houses that are going up right behind it, if you're in the
Right.
back parking lot,
Okay.
that's where we're at
okay,
here.
thank you.
And they are up to our standards.
Yes, absolutely, and,
Built to our standards.
yes.
It looks like Amelia Road Drive is intended to continue on.
It does, yes. This is phase one. And BJ made the point of, if we don't believe they're going to be tearing it up, et cetera, there's a separate construction entrance for the future phases. So this is not the way in for continued construction.
And does Powell Bill funds in some way is sort of compensate us, or every time we do one of these, is it just
Once
a lump
dedicated, this will be added to your Powell Bill map, so it will go into that formula. And I mean, one would presume that it will be being residential and the traffic there, it'll be 20 to 25 years down the road before we're repaving it. At the current rate of inflation, Powell Bill won't entirely pay for that, but it does in fact go into the Powell Bill calculation, and it will be additional lane mileage if dedicated.
So James, do you have anything to add?
I mean, I think they've covered it. We spent a lot of time out on that road when it was first built. There were some issues with construction that ultimately resulted in them basically having to rebuild the road. So if anything, that is a very solid, well-built road. We made sure of that when it was coming through. The sections that are below that are phase 2 of the development, they are constructed to this point, waiting a final lift upon completion of the other houses. So there's really not much more heavy construction that's going to be going down the road. So I don't think it's an inappropriate time to accept them. It's just a matter of if council
Thank you, BJ.
wishes to go ahead and accept them at this time or not.
Because you can see the fire station.
Thank
to give
you.
you some kind
Yeah.
of point of reference. Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's right, because, yeah. They've done a nice job. Needs some trees, but you know, they'll come. Okay? All righty, the next is,
All right, relative to your consent agenda
Consent
for the
agenda, yeah.
business meeting, you've got your schedule, town council meeting schedule change that we talked about for November, just an adoption of that. Again, this is all consent agenda, one vote sort of stuff.
putting the calendar in there.
Again, the policies relative to the ARPA funding that we talked about back at work session, those are the same 5 policies I had forwarded to you before, and I forwarded the 2 of you the templates. So I don't know if you had questions after you had a chance to look at those or whatever, but as you will have noted, outside of those 3 minor things I mentioned, everything was just filling in the blanks type of stuff. Interlocal agreement with Moore County regarding a development proposal. BJ, if you want to put up on the screen the piece in the packet. Yes, it is. Yes. So what this is, and a few of you will recall, not terribly long ago, we had a similar document in front of you with Aberdeen, and that was around the development of what is now the new Honda deal out there on 15501, because you'll recall the development itself was split by the Aberdeen and Southern Pines corporate limits. So we all got together in a room, the planners, the managers, and agreed upon which jurisdiction would handle which portions of that development. The one that's in front of you is a whole lot more straightforward and simpler than that was, because that was actually the construction of a commercial building on a site that previously just had a little house on it, and parking lots and all kinds of commercial types of requirements around landscaping, signage, and other issues. The one that's in front of you is actually out on the edge of the town's extraterritorial jurisdiction. And it's a portion of the extraterritorial jurisdiction that is unlikely to ever be annexed, quite honestly, because there are county utilities already available in the area, and annexations tend to be driven by the availability or non-availability and desire for availability of utilities. So what you're looking at the front of this tract of property is actually already county jurisdiction, and the desire to create a subdivision there. The red square there at the top, well, slightly square, it's got 4 sides anyhow and kind of looks equal, is in fact a portion of the proposed development that currently lies in our extraterritorial jurisdiction. And you'll note that the desired development on that tract involves most of the open space for the jurisdiction. I think it's 2 lots, maybe 3 at the most, and an existing homestead that will remain as part of the application that will be before the county commission. So as a result of the location of this development, the very small to no impact on Southern Pines itself relative to that portion that is in our extraterritorial jurisdiction, rather than trying to split review of site plans or building permits or anything else, our recommendation from the staff level after meeting with the proposed developer and speaking with the county was that we simply, while not giving up our ETJ relative to this particular application, we let the county kind of handle it, because anything that is remotely controversial about this application is really occurring in the county jurisdiction, if there's anything controversial. But that's where all of the lots are essentially being created. A small drive with a cul-de-sac at the end of it kind of goes into what is our ETJ, but
I'm still trying to get my bearings here.
There are currently a few houses in that area that are, am I in the right pew?
I thought it was somewhere down here, but I'm having, like I said, I'm not going to get my bearings. This is what the parcel that I used last time to get my bearings.
So are there any houses on that?
Hold on.
I think the only existing house is I believe the one to the very end, the larger tract up there is an existing place, unless there's something right along the road.
Pew, I thought I'd been on that road.
Yeah, because you've got the turnaround or whatever here,
Okay.
Armstead.
Okay,
So there's a road in there. You don't see a house until you get to the very back,
right,
and that's the piece at the top of the map.
This little parcel right here.
right.
Yeah.
This little parcel right here. So
Gotcha.
So again, it's simply an intergovernmental agreement, which is allowed under 160D, that says, county commissioners and then ultimately county planning department, you kind of handle this one, as opposed to having the applicant have to come through 2 processes and 2 sets of site plans and
Yeah,
2
that
TRCs and all of that. Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yes. Ours from the standpoint of it's in our planning jurisdiction, right? For purposes of this, yes.
Okay, we good with that? Okay.
And then you've got your town council meeting minutes for July on the same consent agenda. And then ordinance 2019, an administrative updates to the code of ordinances. And I'll defer to Jessica on, potentially anyhow, on questions relative to this, but she is leading up a project. We are in the process of trying to update our code of ordinances for multiple reasons. A number of the items that you'll see in this set of changes are a result of the 160D shift in part. But what you've got before you are a series of amendments, one dealing with open consumption, and this was something that the chief of police had looked at back in 2019 and vetted through the law director. And then, well, things happened and it really wasn't as much an issue immediately. But it's an update on the open consumption. An update on unsafe buildings, and we've talked about those recently relative to the building on Pennsylvania. 160D separated those out into a residential and non-residential set of standards. So this is to update the code to just mirror exactly what the state legislature has put forward. References, it updates some code references, it integrates the UDO because there's kind of a broken link in the current code of ordinances relative to that, and then it addresses the name of our Recreation and Parks Department, which the request has been that it change to Parks and Recreation, which is a more standard way of referencing those types of things. So, and I'll turn it over to Jessica to provide any detail that I did not in that very quick overview.
Yeah, no, I mean, Reagan gave a pretty good overview. They're, really just administrative changes. Just to give you a little more background on what we're doing, we are working to review the entire code of ordinances with the goal of recodifying it. And so when we recodify it, we want it to be cleaned up, so to speak. And so our staff is doing work, and then we also have a contract with Municode, who is a company that codifies and hosts the online codes. And they have a legal team with attorneys who actually right now they are going through our code and identifying changes that we need to make as well. So we're both kind of working in tandem, getting some of these things cleaned up. And so at some point in the future, we're going to bring the entire code of ordinances to you and say, please readopt this, and it'll get recodified from that point. So this is the first set of administrative changes that we're asking you to adopt.
Okay. Questions for Jessica? I think that's a great idea, because I think there's probably a lot of things that are either outdated or should have been said clearer or whatever. We're all human. There's always a chance to do it better. And things change.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, 10 years ago, the Go Pines would have said, what are you talking about? You've lost your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions? Well, we got her here. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you much. With that being said, we are now moving to a closed session regarding.
Very, very quickly, you've got one other item, item F, and that's simply the budget amendment based upon the desk presentation made last week for the library. So that'll allow us to get that under contract and move it forward.
Okay,
And
thank
with
you.
that,
The consent agenda?
no, that'll be next week.
Okay.
So we appreciate you all being here. Because we're going into a closed session. It's a personnel. So we need to make a
I'll
motion
move
to open
to open or go into closed session.
Second.
Aye.
Aye. Give people a minute to